What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Thoughts Unchained Podcast. My name is Armaan. I'm your host, and it's been a while since we last recorded an episode. I know that we just dropped one a few weeks ago, but it's been a long time since Thoughts Unchained has actually been creating some new podcasts for you to listen to, and this is a brand new, fresh perspective. Coming towards the end of 2022, I'm joined today by a very special guest. I'm joined today by Arnav. What's up, Arnav?
What's up, Armaan? Thank you for having me in your podcast, and I'm looking forward to for this episode.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thank you for joining. In today's episode, we're going to be touching on um, the topic of societal norms around fitting in, social circles, so what it feels like to feel left out, and sort of the concepts around popularity. This is similar to some topics that I talked about in episode 3 of season 1 in a solo episode. We just felt that it was better to flesh them out in a back and forth conversation, and Arnav has some new inputs and some new perspectives to share on these topics. We also plan on touching on memories and the benefit of experiencing them in the moment as opposed to focusing heavily on recording them, as well as self-reflecting and the benefits that self-reflection can have on us as people. But first and foremost, as is customary on this podcast, how have you been doing, Arnav? What have you been up to recently?
I've been doing good. I've Winter break has recently started, so I'm just relaxing at home and taking my mind off of school, especially pre-calculus and physics. And I've been busy with school and and extracurricular activities like student council, global issues, and Model UN.
Sounds like you've been keeping yourself busy. That's really good. Yeah, I can definitely relate to you when you say that it's busy with school. But that's good. You're making some good progress, and it seems like you're doing stuff that is really fulfilling.
Yeah.
Now just to jump right into today's topic, I believe you wanted to start out with societal norms and feeling left out. So you mentioned that you were sort of inspired to talk about these topics when you heard episode 3 of season 1. So I was curious to ask you, just maybe as a diving board for this conversation, what was it that you sort of felt was most important to touch on about feeling left out, or what sort of came to your mind when you thought of that topic?
What sort of came to my mind is I have a lot of thoughts about societal norms because I would always talk to my friends about fitting in fitting in with my social groups, and I would always get advice from them about how to fit in, and I've witnessed a lot of like what's that word, bad I witnessed a lot of societal norms, especially in my new high school.
That makes sense, yeah. I've also had quite a lot of discussions with my friends around societal norms. Um, have you ever felt like you've been left out? Perhaps maybe that's something that we've all felt before, but is that something that you felt recently? Like, is that even if you don't feel comfortable sharing the experience, how did that make you feel if you've ever felt like you were left out or sort of struggling to find your place?
Yes, I did feel left out. Like, for example, I'm not really part of the inner circle where all the gossip happens in my school, and I don't feel bad about it. I feel glad that I'm not part of gossiping because I don't like to be a part of drama. And drama just makes me, and like high school drama just makes me feel like the thought of it is very stressful and anxious. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
I get that. So you mentioned that it wasn't really feeling left out. It was more so that you don't feel like you're part of sort of the most, just to use the common term, the more popular crowd, right? Is that correct in what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct. I do not associate myself with the popular crowd of students.
Right, that makes sense. I can relate to what you're saying about not feeling like I am part of the innermost crowd. I try not to take issues with each crowd because I try to see the benefits in each people. But I agree with you when you say that I'm not a fan of gossip, and I found throughout high school that I would rather live a sort of low event life and not deal with sort of drama because I do get sort of anxiety around that, and it kind of makes me go through some highs and lows personally. So I get that, and one thing that I'm really proud of you just observing is that like you've sort of found, I guess, your place or a group to call your own, even though at that age that you're at, even though we're not too far away in age, a lot of people are still really struggling to find their footing. Why do you think some people might struggle to sort of find their place in like social circles? Like, do you sort of have any input on that?
Yeah, so like people in school are like not everyone in school is the same. People are different depending on their personality, looks, appearance. Like I'll give you an example. Like oh, so back to our thing is that people like let's say I forgot what I was going to say.
No worries. I believe you were touching on different factors like personality, appearance, traits, mix like a different mix of people, right?
Yes.
Maybe I'll just pick up where you left off there. I think that there are so many more social groups than maybe people realize. Like a lot of times we see in stereotypes in the media on TV. This is something I'm kind of passionate about. Um, we see like the popular kids, and then we see the nerds, or we see the band geeks, and we see like these stereotypes where it's like you can only be one thing, and your identity can't really be you can't really encompass more than that. But what I found, and maybe I'm wondering if you've felt a similar experience, have you found that there's a lot more social circles and a lot more different types of people than you realized once you got to high school?
Yes, definitely. I realized that there's a lot of different type of people depending on their personality. Like there be people that are dedicated to school and stay be attentive in all their classes, and on the other hand, there are other people that fool around during class and not stay attentive and do not do their homework at all.
Yeah, yeah, I've sort of noticed a similar thing. What sort of societal norms have you noticed personally around social circles? I know that this was something that you wanted to touch on at the outset. Like, are there any specific norms that you feel like people feel forced to follow, or like kids feel pressured to have to abide by?
Yeah, yeah, I feel this might sound weird, but I just noticed that like boys in my school, they would listen to music all the time. Like how they do is like they will wear one AirPod on one ear, and they just listen to music all day. And that's just one thing I noticed, and it just makes me feel, and it's just I'm just curious to know if they're not aware about the the effects of listening to loud music with loud volume.
Yeah, I've wondered that too, actually. I think I have to think about that, but I think a lot of people do the same thing. And they're told not to do something, but they still sort of want to go against that. And I understand the feeling of, oh, you're not really given an explanation why. Like, oh, why shouldn't we listen to loud music? Why shouldn't we do this? But I've noticed that like a lot of people sometimes they're sort of scared to go against what's been defined for them, even if they themselves are not really sure. Maybe after they listen to music for a long time with loud volume, maybe it hurts their ears, and then they're like, "Why am I doing this?" But maybe they just kind of picked up on it from their surroundings. Do you feel like there's ever been a point in your life where you just found yourself doing something and you're like, "Wait, why am I doing this? Like, am I just sort of like subconsciously following what people around me do?" Have you ever had a moment like that?
Yes, definitely. Like, I definitely had those moments where I just realized like, what am I doing? Like, for example, like let's say during the summertime, I would use my Beats Studio 3 headphones to listen to music while I'm working out at the gym, or exercising outdoors, and I would listen to music for like every day for at least like 40 to 50 minutes, and then one point I realized like I'm damaging my hearing, so I try to reduce the amount of time I listen to music.
That's a really good point. I love listening to music, and I think that's actually a very interesting thing that you mentioned because I always felt that by wearing over-the-ear headphones, like I have skull candy headphones that I wear, right? Right now I'm using earbuds to record the podcast, but I don't like listening to music on earbuds because it's just directly in my eardrums. But that's a good point that even listening to it on headphones can be damaging too, and I feel like um, sometimes we forget to take a step back and really evaluate what we're doing and the benefits that it has on us. So that's actually a really intriguing point that you brought up. I've noticed that as well. Like I feel like for me, I've just sort of like when I get bored, I just sort of like will pull out my phone. I guess when I'm out and about, or what even sometimes it used to happen to me when I'm talking to other people. And then I realized while I'm in the middle of a conversation, that's not the best thing to do when other people are talking to you. But it's just something that I sort of picked up on because I saw others doing it as well. So I think we're kind of a reflection of the environment that we're surrounded by. Firstly, I should ask you, what do you think about that statement? Would you agree? Would you disagree that we're sort of a reflection of what we see around us, or do you think that um, it's not as much about our environment, more so about our psychology, personally?
So yes and no. For I do agree with your point because like the environment around you like reflect the reflects on what behavior you're willing to do. Like let's say you see your friends vaping in the washroom, and they peer pressure you to vape, but so you'll be more inclined to vape, but again to vape with them just so you can fit in with them, and I believe that your habits define your identity. I've been reading a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I really like this point he makes about how habits define your identity because all the good habits you do, like say reading books, exercising, it really builds onto what type of person you are.
Interesting. Um, I've heard about Atomic Habits. I know my sister has been reading it. I've been meaning to read it too. That's a really good point about. Um, so would you say then that the person you are sort of affects how well or how little the environment affects you?
Pardon me, what's the question again?
Would you say that the habits that you've built, like say if you have strong habits, do you think that you'll be less likely to be like affected by the environment?
Yes, yes, I do agree with that because, like, if you build by building good habits, you're accomplishing what type of person you want to become. So let's say if you want to become sorry, so back to us saying if you want you'll stick towards your beliefs that'll be harder for other people to influence your beliefs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, what you're mentioning. So I think that that's a good sort of way to put it, that we're a combination of both what happens around us as well as our own personal habits and our beliefs and what we work on. So I think that's a good way to sort of think about like human psychology, since psychology is such a fascinating subject, since there's this whole debate about nature versus nurture, which is why I wanted to ask you that question. Those who believe that we're defined by nature says that it's sort of either genetic or perhaps you could include habits, like you said. Those who, well, yeah, that's nature. I got confused there. Whereas nurture is kind of like the environment you're brought up in. So I think that sort of goes to show that nature and nurture can sort of influence us in our social choices as well. Because I feel like when you, it depends on what you're looking for. At least this is what I found. I found that oftentimes you end up being friends with, or you end up attracting the types of people who, like, based on the energy that you put out. Have you noticed something similar to that?
Yes, I definitely have noticed something similar to that.
So how would you say that your current friend group or the current people that you're surrounded with, do you think that they're like a reflection sort of who you are as a person, and do they sort of like feed into the positive habits that you want to build too?
Hold on, let me think about it. Yes, yes, I do agree. Yes, they do. They want to. So what I've noticed that one of my friends, he told me that he respects my work ethic and dedication in school, and he tells me that a, he wants to become a student like me, but somehow he doesn't do it.
Wow, I mean, firstly, that must be a really high compliment. And yeah, I can definitely see why someone would want to be a student like you. You are very hardworking. But um, yeah, I've kind of been through that too, where sometimes you give your friend advice, um, and then like they're looking for advice from you on how to become better at something. Maybe like fixing their habits, for example. Like I have a specific example of that too. But even after giving my advice and even after trying to explain it, um, sometimes even though if some of my friends are really good people, sometimes they don't pick up on those habits too. What do you think is the best way to go about encouraging them if they don't get it the first time or they don't get it the second time?
I would encourage them to not focus on the outcome of the habit, to focus on how the habit can change your identity and the change the change your identity.
I think that's a good way of looking at it. So a common theme that I've heard what you've said is our identity is very much shaped by our habits. Would that be true?
Yes, that'd be true.
I think that's actually a really positive way of thinking about ourselves, because a lot of people, they think that they're stuck in their ways, or they think that it'll be hard to change who they are as people. But have you heard of the term growth mindset before?
Yes, I have heard of the term growth mindset.
So what would you say if I were to suggest that believing that if you believe that your identity is shaped by your habits, would you say that that's part of a growth mindset too?
Yes, that phrase is associated with growth mindset because the literal definition of growth mindset is the belief that your skills, can change throughout your time, can change, and by building ha- by building good habits, what you're doing is you are literally changing your skills into becoming a better version of yourself.
I think that's a really good connection to make between habits, identity, and growth mindset, because it's not just about being better at this one skill. It's more about shaping yourself into the person that you've always wanted to become. And I think that when you mentioned that thing about your friend taking inspiration from you, um, I think it's important to realize that we're not in this journey alone. Um, that more often than not, our friends are there and they want to help us, or they want to make similar journeys. Um, do you find it easier to sort of go about, this was another topic that I think we've discussed just on our own time, was like self improvement or even self reflection, and maybe to transition into self reflection. Um, Before we get into the self reflecting part, do you ever reflect with your friends, and do you ever sort of look back on what you've done, or do you ever get advice from your friends? I know that your friends sort of seem to seek advice from you.
Yeah, yes, we. Uh, I I don't reflect with reflect with my friends. I, I, I suppose they're not really interested in self reflections. Only like one of my friends told me that they're interested in journaling, but he hasn't got the motivation to start reflecting.
Oh, that's interesting. Have you gotten into journaling?
Yes, I have gotten into journaling.
What would you say is the difference between thinking about your reflections versus actually writing them down?
So the difference is writing down your the difference between so by writing down your thoughts and reflecting on your life, your thoughts will just become more organized because like whatever that's going through your mind, you can express it all on paper. Whereas to reflecting on your mind, it doesn't feel organized to me, and it feels like everything can be scattered together. Do you know what? Do you understand?
Yeah, I feel like when I self reflect, it used to be helpful because I never self reflected anyways, so some self reflection helped more than nothing. But over time, I felt like my mind felt like a junk drawer. And I couldn't really organize everything. Another thing that I found about writing things down is that you can get a timeline of what you felt. It's kind of like a diary almost for self reflection, in the sense that you can tell, say it's the day of recording this is December 19th, 2020, right? Say you wanted to start something at the beginning of December, for argument's sake. You can see what was going through your head, more or less. You can't exactly tell what was going through your head, but you can see what you were thinking. If you were honest with what you wrote, you can tell what you were thinking on the 1st of December, you can tell what you were thinking on the 7th, on the 14th. Um, that's just for me. But what are some big changes in your life and in your maybe, I don't want to use the word personality, because well, maybe some changes in your personality. What are some changes that you've observed in yourself since you started self-reflecting?
I noticed that my mind has stayed calm. Like what I mean by that is I don't think about past events that happened in school. My mind is just focused on the present, and with the activity like recording this podcast episode or watching TV and really indulging myself in the episode and try to enjoy the episode.
That's interesting. You really focus on enjoying and indulging in the episode. A lot of times when we So I assume that you maybe watch episodes of TV and shows to sort of give yourself a break from your work, right? And just to have fun and relax your brain as well.
Yes, I yes I do watch TV shows to relax, and I usually relax during night. And during nighttime, I prefer watching TV.
So a lot of times we watch TV or movies or things like that for that reason, but we don't truly focus on like in the way that it seems like you do it. It's almost like a almost a therapeutic process. That might be a stretch to say, but it seems like you really allow yourself to get as much joy out of watching that show as possible. And maybe that's why you have so much clarity of mind, is that when you take time for leisure, you soak in every moment of it. Is that an accurate description?
Yes, I agree with you. That's an accurate description. Now I just realized that you are correct about how I indulge myself in leisure activities.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed something similar. Like my final exams, my final exams ended a little over a week ago, and this is the first time I didn't even do this over the summer, honestly, because I had a lot of stress that was on my mind and just worrying about the future. I didn't. It's weird to say, but even during the summer, I didn't really take time to properly like have like leisure, even if I watched a movie or something during the school year last year. I didn't. Even during this school year, when I would find time, maybe when I'm eating lunch or something, to just watch a show or something and take a break from my work, I would have other stuff on my mind. I would be like, oh, this assignment is due this day, or I've got to do this group meeting, right? But having had time to just sit down, I've just thought, you know what? I'm gonna give my brain a break. I'm just gonna like sit here and I'm gonna binge the Star Wars movies. And like I found that this is the first time, maybe since I was like a little kid, that I've truly found myself soaking in all the joy of watching something. And you mentioned your quality of sleep at night. That probably has a factor in it too, but I know a lot of people struggle with getting good sleep. Like I struggle to get good sleep. Like before all my midterms and finals, I got like 2 3 hours of sleep less per night than I did on a normal night. So how do you think you maintain that peace of mind when you're trying to go to sleep? Do you have like a routine for that?
Yes, I do have a routine. Um, this routine has a term, and it's called sleep hygiene. And I recommend you search it up to get a better night, to improve your sleep quality.
Interesting sleep hygiene. That's a interesting way to put it. So, um, do you turn off screens and electronics before you go to sleep at all?
Yes, definitely. Like what I would do is I'd put my so the laptop I'm using, I would put my laptop downstairs, put my phone in my backpack, turn off the Wi-Fi, and I'd put my AirPods in my closet, and then I would just relax, do some mindfulness breathing, read a book, journaling, or write poems.
Those are all really good things to do before sleeping. I've gotten that habit down of turning electronics off like an hour before I go to sleep, and I've tried to get into the practice of reading and just turning on like a lamp with less brightness. But I find that like as a student, I often get really busy and I don't have time to really sit down and just do breathing, meditation, mindfulness, and journaling the way I usually like to. Do you find that to be a challenge, or do you force yourself to make time every time before you go to sleep to do all that?
I don't find it a challenge. I make it I make it a habit just to do sleep hygiene before I go to sleep during school days, but Well, let's say my sleep hygiene is usually around 45 minutes long, but I allow my sleep hygiene to be flexible so I could still relax my mind and get, go to bed on time. So, like, what I would do is, let's say if I get, if it's 9:15 and I'm going to get ready to sleep, I'll just read a book for 20 minutes and go to sleep at 9:40. But then in the morning I'll put my alarm to like 6:50 to 7 o'clock, so I still get 9 hours of sleep.
That's that is some honestly very profound wisdom that I think a lot of people who might be a lot older than you still may be seeking that sort of like routine. So first of all, credits to you for figuring that out. I think that term sleep hygiene is genius. I may have to borrow that. Um, I definitely learned that from this episode, but yeah. So did you always have like a consistent time that you slept at, or did you find that that varied? Because I find that one of my biggest challenges is a precise like time to sleep. It's not like I stay up until the morning and like never really past midnight, but nonetheless, I find it a challenge. Um, have you always sort of had a consistency of when you went to sleep, or is that something you had to learn?
Because I have a like this school year, I have a consistency of what time I want to go to sleep. Like during school days, I want, I prefer to go to like late, like go to sleep at 9:15. I wake up at 6:25. But during the weekends, I let myself stay up at night and watch TV, movies, and spend time with friends. But let's say if I still stay up like 12 a.m. in the morning, I wake up at 12 p.m. the next day, I'll try to sleep earlier, like 11, like 10:30 to 11, and still wake up at around 9:30 to 10:15, so I can still eat breakfast.
So if your sleep schedule gets disrupted or your circadian rhythm, you don't try and fix it all in one night, right? You sort of try to gradually change it.
Yes, I yes, I do try to gradually change it.
I think that's a big key that maybe many people struggle with. I know I had to learn that too. That um for example, I found that like if my sleep schedule is really off, I'm not the type of person where I can just I guess deprive myself of sleep one night, or if I went to sleep really late one day, I can't wake up really early that morning and tire myself out and go to sleep earlier that night, because for me I'm more of a light sleeper. So I think like just in general with the brain, not even just when it comes to sleep, I think gradual changes are really important. Like I have a video on my YouTube channel, a subtle plug, AST Productions. Um, it's called 5 minutes a day, and the premise of the video is like it's about building keystone habits. So habits that are they're at the core of your day basically. They're like the tenets around which you build, and it's like for example, you say you tell yourself you want to run like every day. Um, if you tell yourself you're going to do like 20-25 minutes every day, that probably sounds really daunting. And then on those days, inevitably, when you don't feel like doing something, you're going to be like, oh, I don't want to do 25 minutes. But if you just tell yourself to do 5 minutes a day, you'll be like, okay, that's not that bad. And then once you start, you're probably not going to stop after 5 minutes realistically. You're probably going to do more than that. So I feel like maybe that's a good sort of technique for someone to use for sleep hygiene is maybe go 10-15 minutes at a time. How would you recommend that someone implements like sleep hygiene into their bedtime routine?
I would recommend by finding an activity that does involve electronic screens, that's first thing, either by reading book, journaling, or any other activity, and then I'll start off by let's say at 10 to 15 minutes of just reading a book, and then go to sleep, and then I'll gradually I don't know. So I'll find a set time that allows you to feel sleepy. Like, let's say when I turn off my screen for 1 hour before I go to sleep and read a book 30 minutes before to go to sleep, I usually find that I get a good night's sleep. So what I'm trying to say is do trial and error. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, so just finding out whatever works for each individual person.
Yes.
I think that's a fair strategy because a lot of times we think that what worked for this person is going to work for us, or that we have to stick with this one thing. But we're all different. We all have different brains. Like, for example, me being a light sleeper, some people are heavy sleepers, and some people get too much sleep, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that that's really important. I wanted to ask you about your hobby of poetry because you mentioned that a while back as well, just privately, uh, and you brought it up now. When did you get into that? And yeah, just maybe my first question is when did you get into poetry?
I got into poetry say 2 to 3 weeks ago.
Okay, so it's right around the time that you messaged me, right?
Yes.
So what do you like about it, and is there any sort of like genre of poetry that you prefer to write?
So first, what I like about it is I could just express myself creatively, and I find it as an alternative to songwriting. And I stopped songwriting because I noticed that it really affected my affected my mental health because I used my past experiences to write songs about, and it just brings up events from the past. And now I use poetry to just reflect, to creatively express myself, and I find that I don't worry, and I find that I really enjoy it. Sorry, what's the second question?
What was the second question? Oh, is there any specific type of poetry you like writing? Like there's like spoken word, there's like there's like sonnets, there's great I'm bringing up genres and now I'm blanking on all the types of poems because I haven't written. But like how do you write poetry? Do you just sort of write it like um free verse sort of? Like just without any constraints?
Yes, I write it as free verse.
Okay. When you're writing poetry, I know you mentioned that reflecting on your past experiences was sort of like it brought you down when you were writing songs. So do you prefer instead to write about like do you write about like your future desires or something, or do you just write about like whatever's going on in your head,
Mm. I,
like your thoughts, kind of?
yes, I do write about my thoughts. Let me just check. Um, Let me just check on what topics I use for my poems.
Okay, you know what? I'll do the same. It seems like in the spirit of the episode. Just so that there's no awkward silence on the podcast. Um, yeah, I was just gonna say about the point of poems. Um, it's it's definitely a therapeutic exercise for me. Um, do you feel like it sort of helps you understand your own emotions as well?
Yes, it does help me understand my own emotions.
I feel like speaking of how we talked about societal norms in the beginning of the episode, I don't mean to generalize. I don't think that this is the case like in general, but I do think a lot of times I almost feel like guys especially are not as encouraged as they should be about writing poetry or sort of just journaling and these kinds of practices. Have you noticed something similar to that too, or would you say you don't have that experience?
Yes, of course. I noticed a similar thing in my high school.
That's interesting. Did you end up finding some of the topics that you don't have to share what topics or what you wrote, but did you find some of the stuff you wrote?
Yes, I did find some of the things I wrote about for my poems.
Um, so when you look back at what you've written, have you seen like growth in your, not even just your ability to write, but like in your state of mind? Like when you look at the stuff you were writing, can you tell sort of what you were thinking at that time or what your emotional state was?
Yes, I could definitely recognize the difference. Like, like in the first notebook, I'd just be reflecting about my frustration about following about societal norms, and now times I just reflect on whatever's going through my mind at that moment.
Okay, so you've started to go kind of like inward rather than outward with your writing.
Yes.
You know, that actually brings up two artists that like come to mind. One who I'm pretty sure you're aware of just because like I've seen some of the stuff you posted on social, and two albums. Like one of them is Kendrick Lamar and Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am familiar
Um,
with that.
so there's that, which like that whole album. So like Kendrick is very conceptual with everything he does. And I've noticed kind of like I read this thing online. It's like, oh, Kendrick is sort of going more in, like it's a very introspective album, right? It's like sort of him going through therapy in a way, right? Reflecting on his life experiences.
Yes,
And it's like, oh, sorry, you were gonna say something?
no, no, I was gonna say
What
it.
I was gonna say like following that pattern of writing more about what you observe about the world around you to like reflecting on yourself. I noticed that too. Kendrick in a lot of his other albums provided sort of commentary on what happened in the world around him through a metaphor of his life experiences. And then in Mr. Morale, he like sort of started to reflect inwards and notice things about himself. The second album from this past year is, do you know who Denzel Curry is?
Yes, I do know what Denzel Curry is.
Have you heard of Melt My Eyes, See Your Future?
Yes, I have.
So that's the other one that came to mind, is that Denzel, in this episode, I mean album of his, he really did a lot of self-reflection. Granted, like he started the album observing what was going on, um or like maybe Melt Session number one, the intro to that album, he sort of reflected on himself, then he observed what happened in the world around him, then he came to his own conclusion about like sort of fighting his own ways. um and I feel like that's really interesting that just when you mentioned that your poetry went from talking about societal norms to talking about yourself, um do you think that when you observe the world around you, like if you stop thinking about yourself for a little bit and like you if you take the time to look at what's going on around you, when you come back to self-reflect, do you think it gives you a new perspective on your own like personality? I'm not sure if that made sense what I said, but do you see what I'm like, does that sort of make sense to you?
Yeah, yes, it does make sense to me.
Okay, have you noticed any examples of that you could share about like looking outwards and then looking inwards and your discoveries that you made?
Yeah, yeah, I do have some examples, but I think I wrote them down in my journal. So if you could excuse me, I'll just check out what I wrote.
Yeah, no problem, no problem at all. um so through artists like Kendrick or Denzel, have you found some, I guess, inspiration in poetry through like some like sort of rap artists? Like have you Have you taken inspiration from them at all?
Hmm. Not, not really. I haven't taken inspiration from other artists because, well, in most cases, I don't I don't understand the storytelling behind each song. Like, for example, for Denzel Curry's song, sorry, not Denzel Curry, Kendrick Lamar's song, "Count Me Out." He definitely, I could tell he's rapping about a relationship of a previous relationship. I don't understand like what's the message he's trying to get across his listeners.
That's a good point. Um, the message is sometimes hard to decipher. For me, I noticed that I just take inspiration from a technical standpoint, kind of, in terms of like fitting words together and fitting rhymes together. But I guess when you talk about writing free verse, not like you don't focus on rhyming, do you? Or you don't like focus on rhyme schemes?
No, I don't focus on rhyme scheme. I focus on the narrative and literacy devices.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed that too. Sometimes when I write free verse poetry, it comes across more as a story that I'm telling rather than focusing on the technical aspects of it. So I definitely see what you're saying. You mentioned you were looking through your notebook for something.
Yes, I did. Yes, I was.
So what have you found?
So, so one thing that I found is on November 18, 2022, I reflected on like about my past experience from a philosophical lens, like how people like in the past how people perceive me as this evil human being, but in reality, I'm not. I don't try to perceive myself as being evil. I just perceive myself to just being myself and just being a nice and kind guy.
Yeah, I'm shocked to say that to hear that someone thought that about you. Um, sometimes like this is a difficult thing to say because I don't want people to get into the habit of thinking that others are the problem, not them. But sometimes it's just interesting to hear what others say about you. Sometimes it's a reflection on you, if they're being honest. Sometimes it's more of a reflection on them and what they're going through at that time. So that's really odd, but it's good that you were able to make sense of it and not take it too much to heart. Um,
Right.
I'm kind of yeah. Sorry, you continue.
Yeah. So, so back to our thing is that I have to mention that if it's one thing I noticed is that if it's hard to decipher the song's meaning, then I'd say it's a really good thing. So because the message is hidden and you really have to understand the context clue and emotion and tone to really understand the story.
Yeah, that's a good point. That like it's a good exercise, right? Do you want to hear something that I've written? This was May 11th, 2022. This is a gem from like months back.
Yes, about
This was this was me going through a period of heavy self-doubt. Um, and like this was like when I was feeling particularly lost at the time. I wrote um basically about feeling lost, like soul searching, like rummaging through my mind's archives, sort of like looking in the mirror and like wondering, well, I usually write like poems with rhymes, for example, right, and focus on like a lot of the technical aspect. But I was just feeling like that day. I was just feeling like you know what? Let me just paint. It's like painting on a canvas. Let me just write out some words. Um, and I feel like I had a similar experience too, where I tried to make sense of a bad thing that debatably bad. I guess sometimes when you go through adversity, it strengthens you, right? but it felt really bad to feel really lost and directionless, and I tried to make sense of it, and I think poetry really helped me. Um, do you think it gives you like clarity of mind at all, and like do you think it sort of alleviates your worries in any sense?
Yes, it does help me alleviate my worries.
That's a good thing to hear. Sorry, I thought you were about to continue with that point. Um, that's it's definitely a good thing, and I think that um, what advice would you give to someone who's thought about um, just getting into writing, whether it be poetry, whether it be journalism? Maybe it's someone who's too scared, who like to maybe feeling self conscious or feeling like they're gonna be judged. What advice would you give to someone who wants to start writing?
So what? So the advice I give is don't. Uh, so in terms of health, don't don't care about what other people might think about you. Just remember, just keep in your mind that whatever habits that'll help you improve your health, like journalism and poetry, it'll make you a better person. So don't focus on the negatives. Just focus on how it can improve you as a person.
I like that. I like that a lot. Is there any topics that you wanted to bring up? Um, just sort of as we draw to a close of this podcast.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
there was one thing. Was it the topic on memories?
Yes.
Okay. So do you wanna bring up what your idea was about memories and experiencing them?
Yes. So my take on memories is that I prefer to experience them in the moment rather than just capturing all on camera because what I find is that because what I just find that just by living this experiencing your like happiness in the moment, it just brings satisfaction in your life. So you can just go on and say it brings satisfaction because you realize that you've been happy at some point in your life and you can remember it in the long term. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I've read that when you take a photo, thinking that like it'll preserve your memory, um, you may sure you see the photo, um, but you can't always remember what you were thinking at that time. Like it kind of gives you a distorted memory of what you were feeling at that moment. Whereas if you're looking through a camera screen or looking through your phone or something, looking at your phone as you're taking a photo, even if you're looking through the camera, you can't crystallize that memory quite as well. Versus if you do experience it in the moment, you can sort of remember how it felt. You may not like remember the exact like scene in your head, but you remember sort of the memories. Um, do you think that you've ever had a time when you focused too much on capturing the memories externally, or has it always been something that you cared about to experience them in the moment?
So, so yes and no. So yes, I do care about experiencing, about enjoying the moment. The, yes, I do care about enjoying the happiness in the moment, and sometimes and on other cases I'll be focusing on taking by by going on my camera and taking photos so I can edit them later, which is a hobby I have is photography.
Okay. Do you find it difficult, say if you're out with your family, say you see something nice, do you find it difficult to decide whether you want to take a photo for photography purposes or whether you want to experience it in person? Like is that something that ever conflicts you?
No, it doesn't conflict me because what I would do is just is take out my phone and see which views would look really nice on camera, and if I think it look nice, I'll take a photo and then read and check it and check to the photo to see if I like it or not.
I think that's really sensible to do. Um, yeah, do you have any more thoughts sort of on this topic that you wanted to share?
Oh, that's all the thoughts I have.
Okay, I think that draws us to a close of this episode of the Thoughts Unchained podcast, which is, by my count, I think this is the first episode that has been recorded in honestly probably a full year now. So thank you for being a part of this, Arnav. Thanks for taking the time to do this podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And thank you all for listening to the Thoughts Unchained podcast. That concludes this episode. If you like this episode, be sure to like and comment if you're on YouTube, and subscribe to Thoughts Unchained podcast. If you're listening to this on any other directory, I would really appreciate it if you could give a rating. And just a reminder that we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and various different distributors. Um, yeah, that concludes this episode of the Thoughts and Chain podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. This has been Armaan. Until next time, keep your head in the clouds.